I'm Barney Cole, 45 years old, a construction project manager with 2 decades of steady experience under my belt. Over the years, I've climbed the ranks from a site supervisor to managing complex projects with budgets totaling over $8.5 million annually. My role demands precision, foresight, and an unwavering commitment to detail. Every contract I oversee, every budget I draft, and every supplier negotiation I conduct requires exact documentation and methodical follow-through. I take pride in my ability to produce comprehensive progress reports, maintain up-to-date financial ledgers, and ensure every project milestone aligns with contractual obligations and safety standards. Last month, my professional discipline was put to the ultimate test, not at a job site but at home. My wife, Linda, was diagnosed with a life-threatening condition that required urgent surgery. The medical bills were staggering, and insurance coverage fell short. As the family's primary financial manager, I knew I had to act quickly and decisively. After evaluating every possible option, I made the difficult but necessary decision to liquidate our major assets to fund her surgery and the associated medical expenses. I sold our house, the place where we built our life together. I sold my work truck, a crucial tool in my profession, one I'd relied on for years to maintain timely site visits and client meetings. I even pawned personal belongings, our television, the couch, and other household items. The total liquidation amounted to $118,000. I documented every transaction meticulously, keeping receipts, bank statements, and legal paperwork organized in a secure file folder labeled Linda's Medical Fund, ensuring traceability and accountability. I knew that given the scale of these transactions, clear records would be essential for both tax and legal purposes. After arranging the funds, Linda underwent her surgery. I monitored her recovery closely, coordinating follow-up appointments and managing ongoing medical bills. When she was finally discharged and the doctors declared her stable, I allowed myself a moment of relief. But just 1 week after she was back on her feet, Linda filed for divorce. Almost immediately, she claimed the remainder of our marital assets, including savings and investments I managed professionally. I met the news with calm professionalism, suppressing any emotional reaction. Instead of escalating the situation, I simply said, "I understand." That was my calculated response, measured, precise, and non-confrontational. Underneath that calm exterior, however, I was already mapping out my next move. Years of experience taught me that in situations like this, patience paired with strategic planning and thorough documentation is the strongest weapon. While Linda assumed that my liquidation of assets and financial openness left me vulnerable, she hadn't accounted for my commitment to meticulous record-keeping and my expertise in contractual matters and asset management. I had anticipated complications, which is why every transaction related to the asset sales was captured with date-stamped receipts, notarized bills of sale, and formal notifications to lenders and insurers. I also retained copies of our prenuptial agreement and marital financial disclosures, which outlined protections for my vested employment benefits and other assets. As I sat in room 214 of a roadside motel that evening, no longer at home but temporarily displaced, I reviewed the folders and digital backups on my laptop. The surroundings were sparse, but the setting was ideal for focused, strategic thought. I organized my documents, compiled notes on our financial situation, and began outlining steps to protect my interests and restore financial stability. This was no longer just a personal crisis. It had become a professional challenge demanding the same methodical approach I apply to complex construction projects. I was determined to navigate these treacherous waters with the same precision, documentation, and strategic discipline that had defined my career. My next moves would be careful, calculated, and informed by a clear understanding of legal frameworks and asset management. That moment marked the beginning of a new phase, from a man who sacrificed everything to save his wife's life, to a man who would systematically reclaim what was rightfully his, using every tool in his professional arsenal. Over the course of more than 20 years, my professional journey in the construction industry has been defined by steady progression, increasing responsibility, and a constant drive toward efficiency and excellence. I began as a site supervisor fresh out of college, managing small teams and handling day-to-day operations on modest projects. Early on, I learned that success in this line of work hinged not only on technical knowledge, but on meticulous attention to detail, transparent communication, and unwavering accountability. Those lessons shaped my approach to every project I took on thereafter. As I moved up the ladder, I transitioned into roles with broader scope and higher stakes: assistant project manager, then project manager, and eventually lead project manager at a reputable mid-size construction firm. Each promotion came with more complex challenges: multi-million-dollar contracts, tighter deadlines, demanding clients, and intricate coordination among suppliers and subcontractors. My role expanded beyond on-site oversight to encompass budgeting, contract negotiation, risk assessment, and strategic resource allocation. Throughout this ascent, I developed a reputation for reliability and precision. I was known for drafting comprehensive project plans and budgets that were both realistic and strategically advantageous. For example, on a recent $8.5 million commercial construction project, my team implemented cost-saving measures that ultimately reduced overhead expenses by 12% without compromising quality or timeline. These savings were achieved through renegotiated supplier contracts and streamlined workflow processes I personally designed and enforced. Contract management became a cornerstone of my expertise. I negotiated terms stringently to protect the company's interests, ensuring every agreement included clear deliverables, penalty clauses for delays, and well-defined payment schedules. I maintained exhaustive records: contracts, change orders, invoices, and correspondence, all organized within a secure digital filing system. This attention to documentation not only mitigated risks, but also supported smooth audits and client transparency. Moreover, I managed supplier and subcontractor relationships with a professional balance of firmness and collaboration, knowing that positive partnerships are key to project success. I insisted on formal communication channels and documented approvals for all project modifications. This disciplined approach was critical when unforeseen challenges arose, allowing us to adapt quickly without sacrificing accountability. My professional diligence extended to personal financial management as well. Over the years, I accrued vested benefits through my employment, including a severance package and stock options valued at approximately $75,000. The details of these benefits were outlined in my employment contract, which I reviewed annually to ensure compliance and to stay informed of any changes. I never underestimated the importance of knowing the fine print. Given the scale of the projects I managed and the financial stakes involved, I cultivated a habit of preserving every piece of documentation related to my work: progress reports, budget updates, correspondence with clients and suppliers, change order approvals, and risk assessments. These records formed a paper trail that attested to my professionalism, decision-making, and the value I brought to the company. Unfortunately, this very transparency and thorough documentation, which I considered assets, became vulnerabilities in my personal life. Linda, my wife, grew increasingly aware of the financial depth I controlled and the assets I managed. While she expressed gratitude during the early stages of her illness, the liquidation of our assets to fund her surgery inadvertently exposed a trove of financial information. Unbeknownst to her, I had retained detailed records of every transaction, legal bills of sale, notarized receipts, and bank statements that would later prove crucial. In hindsight, I realized that my methodical approach in my profession extended into my personal finances, which provided me with leverage when the situation deteriorated. By safeguarding these records, I preserved the ability to track asset flows and ownership, an advantage Linda either overlooked or underestimated when she initiated divorce proceedings shortly after her recovery. This professional vigilance is what sets me apart and forms the foundation of my strategy moving forward. I understand contractual nuance, I am fluent in interpreting financial disclosures, and I know how to leverage documented evidence in legal settings. More importantly, I possess the patience and discipline to apply these skills methodically. As I reflect on my 2 decades in construction management, I see that the same principles that guided my career now guide my personal fight for justice: meticulous documentation, strategic foresight, and unwavering professionalism. With these tools, I'm prepared to challenge the unexpected betrayal and protect what is rightfully mine. Linda Cole's decision to file for divorce came as a calculated response to mounting financial pressures she faced and a strategic, if misguided, attempt to capitalize on the liquidation of our marital assets. In the weeks following my decision to sell the house, the work truck, and pawn personal belongings totaling $118,000, she perceived an opportunity to secure a larger share of the marital estate before I could impose any legal protections. From her perspective, acting quickly was paramount, before I could consolidate control or shield the remaining assets through contractual or legal means. However, what Linda failed to grasp were the critical safeguards embedded in our prenuptial agreement and the comprehensive documentation I meticulously maintained. The prenuptial agreement, drafted professionally before our marriage, included explicit clauses protecting my vested employment benefits, stock options, and severance entitlements. It also outlined clear procedures for asset division, requiring full disclosure and mutual agreement before any significant property transfers. These legal instruments were designed not only to protect my personal investments, but to ensure transparency and fairness in financial dealings. Linda's lawyer, either due to oversight or underestimation of my preparedness, neglected to fully investigate these contractual stipulations and the accompanying financial documentation. They overlooked that I was the sole administrator of our joint financial accounts, the only one with passwords and access to banking systems, including online portals and two-factor authentication devices. This exclusive control was critical because it meant Linda had no unilateral means to reallocate funds or liquidate assets without my knowledge or cooperation. Moreover, the legal counsel did not anticipate the implications of my digital security measures, which created a robust barrier against unauthorized transactions. In addition to the prenuptial protections and digital account controls, I had retained every receipt, bill of sale, and notarized document related to the asset liquidation. These documents included detailed timestamps, seller and buyer information, and precise financial figures. I recorded every transaction in an index ledger that I kept both in hard copy and encrypted digital formats, ensuring redundancy and accessibility. These records were not mere paperwork. They were strategic assets that would be indispensable in contesting any false claims or misrepresentations. The convergence of Linda's financial desperation, her lawyer's incomplete due diligence, and her misreading of our legal protections set the stage for a complex dispute. Recognizing this, I immediately engaged Mark Jensen, an employment and family law specialist with extensive experience in marital asset disputes and employment benefits litigation. Mark's pragmatic and thorough approach reassured me that my documentation and contractual knowledge would provide a solid foundation for defending my interests. Parallel to Mark's involvement, I reached out to Tom Richards, a trusted former colleague and IT consultant, to audit and secure our joint financial systems. Tom's role was critical. He verified that all account access points were under my exclusive control, implemented additional security protocols, and created forensic backups of transaction logs. This technical reinforcement ensured that any attempt by Linda or her representatives to tamper with financial data would be detectable and could be presented as evidence. Together, Mark and Tom became integral parts of my strategic defense team. Their combined expertise, legal and technical, complemented my methodical documentation and professional discipline. While Linda may have believed she could quickly seize remaining assets by initiating divorce proceedings, she underestimated not only the legal protections in place, but also the rigorous behind-the-scenes preparations underway. This phase of the conflict underscored a critical professional lesson. Even in deeply personal crises, the application of contractual knowledge, digital security, and precise documentation can decisively influence outcomes. Linda's actions were driven by short-term financial pressures and a lack of appreciation for the legal complexities involved. In contrast, my response was measured, leveraging every professional asset at my disposal to counter her strategy. As I prepared to confront the legal challenge ahead, I remained focused on maintaining control of the narrative through evidence, expert counsel, and technological safeguards. I knew that my ability to provide clear, organized documentation, combined with Mark's legal acumen and Tom's technical support, would be decisive in exposing Linda's financial misrepresentations and breach of our prenuptial terms. This strategic alliance marked a turning point, not just a reaction to betrayal, but the initiation of a controlled, professional campaign to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The groundwork laid here would define the systematic approach I would employ in the ensuing legal battles. Despite the personal upheaval, my professional discipline and foresight ensured that I was not left vulnerable, but rather positioned to respond effectively to every move Linda would make. As I carefully reviewed the divorce petition Linda had filed, my professional instincts immediately kicked in. The document was dense, filled with legal jargon and financial declarations, but my years of experience parsing contracts and financial statements gave me an edge. I approached this not as a personal attack, but as a complex project requiring detailed analysis and verification. My first step was to cross-reference every figure she reported against the extensive records I had meticulously maintained. From the outset, discrepancies emerged. Linda's financial disclosures omitted approximately $45,000 in debts that I knew existed, credit card balances, medical bills unrelated to her surgery, and personal loans she had failed to mention. These hidden liabilities were not only significant in amount but critical in impact, as they directly affected the net value of our marital estate. The omission suggested a deliberate attempt to inflate her standing and secure a larger share of the assets. Next, I turned to the asset valuations she provided. Many were understated or misrepresented. For example, Linda claimed that the remaining savings accounts held less than their actual balances, and certain personal property items were either excluded or assigned negligible worth. This misreporting was particularly evident in the context of the home furnishings and electronics I had pawned or sold, items that still had residual value or outstanding pawn loan obligations. Such inaccuracies compromised the integrity of her financial disclosures and would become a key point of leverage. To ensure a thorough assessment, I pulled out the property titles, sale receipts, and notarized bills of sale relating to every asset liquidation transaction over the past month. Each was date-stamped and included signatures from all parties involved. I cross-checked these against bank statements reflecting deposit dates and amounts. Every dollar of the $118,000 I raised to cover medical expenses was documented, and none appeared in Linda's filings as having been allocated or settled. This omission was glaring and could not be overlooked. In parallel, I scrutinized the prenuptial agreement line by line, focusing on clauses that addressed the division of assets, debt responsibilities, and vesting schedules for employment benefits. The agreement was thorough and professionally drafted, containing explicit language that protected my severance package and stock options from being treated as marital property. Additionally, it stipulated full disclosure requirements and penalties for non-disclosure, which could be invoked if either party concealed financial information or assets. Guided by a cold, methodical mindset, I mapped out the discrepancies and identified multiple leverage points for my legal team. The hidden debts and misrepresented asset values were clear contractual violations. The prenuptial agreement's non-disclosure penalties added potential legal consequences. Moreover, I noted that Linda's filings failed to acknowledge my exclusive administrative control over joint accounts and business-related financial systems, an oversight that weakened her position further. I maintained a comprehensive spreadsheet that catalogued each inconsistency alongside corresponding evidence, scanned receipts, bank statement excerpts, property deeds, and excerpts from the prenuptial agreement. This inventory was organized chronologically and by category, enabling quick reference and strategic deployment during legal proceedings. I also prepared a summary report highlighting the financial misrepresentations and contractual breaches, framing them not as accusations, but as documented facts requiring judicial review. Throughout this process, I refrained from emotional responses. My focus was on precision, clarity, and professional rigor. This was not simply about reclaiming what was mine. It was about holding the system of contractual and legal obligations intact. The evidence pointed toward deliberate concealment and exploitation on Linda's part, but my response would be measured and legally grounded. Sitting in that modest motel room reviewing these findings, I felt the weight of the situation, but also the growing confidence that my years of professional discipline in documentation and contract management were my strongest assets. Each discovered discrepancy was a potential pivot point, a calculated move in the broader strategy I was assembling. The next phase would require assembling a legal team and technical experts to validate and present this evidence effectively. But for now, the discovery phase was complete. Linda had hidden significant debts, misrepresented asset values, and violated prenuptial and financial disclosure agreements. This knowledge formed the foundation for the systematic case I intended to build, safeguarding my financial interests and professional reputation against exploitation. I immediately arranged a consultation with Mark Jensen, an employment and family law specialist I had worked with on a prior contract dispute. Mark's reputation for thoroughness and practicality made him the ideal ally as I prepared to navigate this complex legal battle. Our first meeting was scheduled for the following morning at his downtown office. I brought with me a comprehensive binder containing every piece of documentation related to our financial situation and Linda's recent actions: receipts, contracts, correspondence, bank statements, notarized bills of sale, and the prenuptial agreement. Each document had been meticulously organized chronologically and categorized by type, reflecting the same methodical approach I applied to managing multi-million-dollar construction projects. During that initial consultation, Mark and I began systematically cataloging the evidence. We started by cross-referencing the asset liquidation receipts against the figures Linda had reported in her filings. The discrepancies were glaring. Linda's divorce petition failed to account for the $118,000 in assets I had liquidated, and we identified over $45,000 in debts she concealed. Mark immediately recognized the strategic advantage these omissions presented. He emphasized that such financial misrepresentations violated both disclosure requirements and the prenuptial agreement clauses, which stipulated full transparency and penalized non-disclosure. Together, we developed an evidence inventory spreadsheet, itemizing every receipt, contract, and email correspondence. Each entry included detailed notes on date, transaction parties, and relevance to the case. This spreadsheet would become our operational blueprint, guiding legal filings and negotiations. Mark underscored that the strength of our case hinged not just on possessing the documents, but on presenting them in a clearly organized, legally coherent format. It was critical to demonstrate a consistent pattern of financial deceit and contractual breaches by Linda. Recognizing the importance of securing digital evidence, I enlisted Tom Richards, a trusted former colleague and IT consultant with expertise in digital forensics and cybersecurity. Tom's role was to audit and fortify our joint financial systems. He confirmed that I maintained exclusive administrative access to all joint accounts and business financial software, protected by complex passwords and two-factor authentication devices. Tom created forensic backups of transaction logs, ensuring that any unauthorized access or alterations could be detected and time-stamped. He also implemented additional encryption measures to prevent potential tampering during the legal process. Tom's technical audit revealed that Linda lacked the passwords and authentication devices necessary to conduct any independent financial transactions. This fact was crucial. It invalidated any claims she might make about unilateral control or asset reallocation. Moreover, the forensic backups provided an incontrovertible digital trail that would corroborate our documentation, reinforcing the integrity of our evidence. Parallel to these efforts, I began compiling witness statements from colleagues and friends who had observed Linda's opportunistic behavior following her recovery. These statements were not emotional testimonials, but factual observations, noting her sudden legal consultations, inquiries about the asset liquidation, and attempts to access accounts she was excluded from. Each statement was drafted to emphasize observable facts relevant to the case, avoiding speculation or personal judgments. Mark advised me to prepare formal declarations summarizing these witness accounts, which could be submitted as exhibits during court proceedings. He pointed out that such corroborating testimony would support our claims of financial misconduct and strengthen motions to enforce prenuptial penalties and asset freezes. Throughout this phase, my internal monologue remained focused and analytical. I recognized that Linda had underestimated two critical factors: The legal strength of the prenuptial agreement, especially its non-disclosure and penalty provisions, and my exclusive control over the financial systems. Her assumption that she could rapidly seize assets without resistance was a strategic miscalculation. I took detailed notes on these observations, preparing arguments that would leverage these oversights. For instance, the prenuptial agreement included a clause imposing substantial penalties for non-disclosure of debts or assets, which, when combined with the concealed $45,000 in liabilities, could result in significant financial consequences for Linda. Additionally, I was confident that our digital forensic evidence would expose any attempt she made to manipulate or misrepresent financial data. As the consultation ended, Mark and I outlined the next steps, finalizing the evidence inventory, drafting initial legal motions, and coordinating with Tom to secure ongoing digital backups as discovery proceeded. We agreed to maintain strict control over communications with Linda's legal team, ensuring that all responses were strategic and documented. Returning to my motel room later that evening, I updated my master spreadsheet with the day's progress. The folder labeled Legal Defense had grown substantially, now a precise map of our case's strengths and vulnerabilities. I reflected on the importance of a multidisciplinary approach, legal expertise, technical security, and methodical documentation, all converging to protect my interests. I noted in my journal, Linda underestimated the prenuptial non-disclosure penalties and my exclusive control over critical accounts. This statement encapsulated the strategic advantage I intended to exploit fully. I knew the road ahead would be challenging, but with Mark's legal acumen and Tom's technical support, I was assembling a formidable defense. This phase was foundational, transforming raw documentation into actionable legal assets. The next moves would focus on formal filings and initiating court interventions to halt further asset dispersal. For now, the meticulous cataloging and securing of evidence set the stage for a systematic response, calculated, professional, and relentless. Mark Jensen sat across from me in his modest downtown office, papers spread across the polished wooden table like a battlefield map. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting slats of shadow across the folders I'd brought, organized, indexed, and annotated as meticulously as any project plan I'd ever managed. Every document, receipts, bank statements, notarized bills of sale, the prenuptial agreement, had been reviewed multiple times from my motel room, but now we were dissecting them together to uncover the exact contours of Linda's misrepresentations and contractual breaches. Mark began by comparing the asset liquidation receipts I'd compiled against Linda's divorce petition disclosures. The discrepancies were immediate and glaring. Of the $118,000 in assets I had documented as sold or pawned, only a fraction appeared in her filings. What's more troubling was an entire category of debt, over $45,000, that Linda had failed to disclose completely. Mark highlighted this figure, explaining how this omission constituted a violation of both the disclosure requirements typically enforced in divorce proceedings and, more critically, specific clauses in our prenuptial agreement. The prenuptial agreement was a linchpin in this case. Mark and I pored over its language line by line, noting provisions that explicitly required full transparency of debts and assets from both parties. There were penalties clearly outlined for non-disclosure, including potential financial sanctions and limitations on claims to certain property. The protection of my vested employment benefits, my severance package and stock options valued at $75,000, was also spelled out in detail, barring Linda from claiming these as part of the marital estate. Mark emphasized that these clauses gave us solid legal ammunition, particularly since Linda's filings directly contradicted the agreement's requirements. Next, we turned our attention to the digital evidence. Tom Richards, my former colleague and trusted IT consultant, had completed a comprehensive audit of our joint accounts and business financial systems. He verified that I was the sole administrator with passwords and two-factor authentication devices. Tom provided technical diagrams illustrating the access hierarchy and security protocols, showing that Linda had neither the credentials nor technical means to execute financial transactions independently. This was critical because it invalidated any claims she might assert about unilateral control or unauthorized asset management. Tom's forensic backups of transaction logs presented another layer of proof. These backups captured every login attempt, account activity and transfer, time-stamped and encrypted to prevent tampering. Mark noted that such digital trails would be irrefutable in court, effectively disproving any narrative Linda's counsel might push about her access rights or asset control. We discussed how these technical exhibits would form a key part of our filings, reinforcing our case with empirical data alongside contractual evidence. Mark also identified breaches of fiduciary duty and potential fraud in Linda's legal declarations. Concealing debts and misreporting asset valuations was not only a violation of the prenuptial agreement, but could be construed as intentional deception under family law statutes. He recommended that we prepare motions alleging fraud with the aim of seeking punitive damages and penalties. We outlined a multi-pronged legal strategy: file counterclaims addressing non-disclosure, request forensic audits by the court, and move to freeze disputed assets pending resolution. These steps were standard in complex asset disputes, but would carry greater weight when supported by the detailed documentation we had. To translate the amassed evidence into actionable filings, we developed an evidence inventory spreadsheet that itemized every document, receipt, and correspondence. Each entry included date, parties involved, financial figures, and relevance to the contractual breaches we had identified. Mark stressed the importance of presenting the evidence chronologically and categorically to demonstrate a consistent pattern of concealment and misrepresentation. This would make it easier for judges and opposing counsel to follow and acknowledge the scope of Linda's breaches. We also plan to submit technical diagrams and digital forensic reports as exhibits. Mark advised that these would need to be accompanied by expert affidavits, clarifying the significance of system controls and access rights to the court. I agreed to work with Tom to draft detailed explanatory statements, ensuring the technical information was accessible to legal professionals unfamiliar with cybersecurity intricacies. Throughout the session, I maintained a clear focus on professionalism and precision. Although the stakes were deeply personal, I understood that success depended on the methodical presentation of facts and the strategic deployment of legal instruments. We avoided emotional language, framing our claims strictly within the parameters of contractual obligations and statutory duties. This approach aligned with my professional experience. Clear documentation and objective analysis were the strongest tools against ambiguity and misrepresentation. Before concluding, Mark and I discussed witness statements. I had begun assembling factual accounts from colleagues and friends who observed Linda's actions post-surgery, her legal consultations, inquiries about the assets, and her attempts to access accounts. Mark recommended formalizing these statements into declarations, emphasizing observed facts rather than opinions. These would supplement our financial evidence, providing corroborative testimony to support claims of opportunistic behavior and breach of duties. We agreed that immediate next steps included drafting initial motions to submit to family court, detailing the non-disclosure of debts, and making formal requests for asset freezes and forensic audits. Mark highlighted the need for tight coordination with Tom on ongoing digital security measures to preserve evidence integrity as discovery proceeded. As I left Mark's office, I felt the momentum shift. The disparate pieces, financial records, contractual clauses, digital forensics, and witness accounts, were converging into a coherent legal strategy. Linda's failure to disclose significant debts and her violation of prenuptial terms were now substantiated with documented proof and technical data beyond dispute. This phase marked the transformation of raw information into a formidable legal case. We had identified the precise contractual violations, amassed corroborative digital evidence, and outlined motions to hold Linda accountable. The professional rigor applied here was the foundation on which I would build the next stage of reclamation: systematic, disciplined, and unyielding. Serving formal notices to Linda's attorney was a deliberate and crucial step in transitioning from preparation to action. With Mark Jensen's guidance, I drafted precise documents that cited the exact contractual breaches and asset misrepresentations uncovered during our exhaustive review. Each notice included references to specific clauses in the prenuptial agreement, particularly those mandating full disclosure of debts and assets, and penalizing non-disclosure. We itemized the undisclosed debts exceeding $45,000, underscored the inaccurate asset valuations she submitted, and highlighted the detailed receipts and notarized bills of sale, proving the $118,000 worth of liquidated assets she failed to account for. The notices also pointed to her unilateral attempts to access or control funds without proper authority. These formal communications served not only as legal warnings, but laid the groundwork for evidentiary support in the court proceedings to come. Mark promptly filed motions with the family court to freeze the joint accounts and any other disputed assets. The motions were comprehensive, supported by our evidence inventory, and referenced the clauses in the prenuptial agreement protecting my vested employment benefits, namely the $75,000 severance package and stock options, which Linda had improperly claimed or attempted to encumber. The motions requested injunctions preventing any transfers or access pending the outcome of the divorce proceedings, thereby preserving the estate intact. Mark also moved to compel full financial disclosure from Linda, seeking to expose the concealed debts and undisclosed transactions definitively. These legal maneuvers were designed to halt any further erosion of the marital assets and to force transparency. Simultaneously, I took proactive steps to safeguard my professional reputation amidst the turmoil. I informed key clients and my employer about the ongoing legal dispute, not in detail but with enough transparency to preempt any rumors or misinterpretations that could damage my standing. I stressed that the matter was strictly personal and was being addressed through appropriate legal channels. This communication was carefully crafted to maintain my credibility and ensure continued trust in my professional capacity. Additionally, I negotiated a new consulting contract that increased my income by 15%, providing financial stability and reinforcing my independence. This strategic move was also a signal, to colleagues and the legal system alike, that I remained professionally resilient despite personal setbacks. Throughout this phase, I maintained a composed and professional demeanor in all communications. Whenever Linda's legal team requested information or attempted informal negotiations, I responded via Mark, adhering strictly to legal protocols. I avoided any direct engagement that could be construed as emotional or reactive, preferring instead to let the documented facts and legal process drive the narrative. My focus remained on methodically reinforcing my position, ensuring every response was measured, fact-based, and aligned with our broader legal strategy. Meanwhile, Linda was unaware of the full extent of the legal pressure building against her. She proceeded with arrangements to liquidate additional assets and secure replacement housing, presumably expecting to benefit from an uncontested divorce settlement. These actions, however, exposed her further to potential legal repercussions, particularly since many transactions lacked proper documentation or involved assets subject to dispute in the pending motions. Her counsel's failure to anticipate our comprehensive evidence and the strict enforcement of prenuptial clauses placed them at a significant disadvantage. Back in room 214 of the motel, I continued reviewing incoming documents and court filings. I kept detailed logs of all communications, legal notices sent and received, court orders, and correspondence with Mark and Tom. I updated our evidence inventory to include motions filed and responses received, ensuring our case file remained current and organized. This disciplined oversight was critical. It prevented any gaps or delays that could weaken our position. I also coordinated closely with Tom to monitor the security of our digital financial systems. He maintained rigorous backups of transaction logs and access records, providing continual forensic assurance that no unauthorized activity could be hidden or erased. Knowing that this technical layer of protection was in place gave me confidence to proceed with legal filings without fear of evidence tampering. This period was a precise balancing act, assertive enough to apply legal pressure and protect assets, yet restrained enough to maintain professional integrity and control. Each formal notice and court filing escalated the situation systematically, setting the stage for forthcoming hearings and negotiations. The strategic freeze on assets forced Linda and her legal team to confront the strength of our documented case, rather than rely on assumptions or rushed settlements. As this phase concluded, I remained vigilant, aware that the legal process would demand unwavering attention and strategic adaptability. The firm legal positioning we established, through formal notices, court motions, and reputation management, created a robust defensive barrier. This foundation was essential to withstand the next phases of the dispute, where Linda would have to respond in the face of mounting evidence and formal legal constraints. In sum, serving the notices and initiating court motions represented a professional escalation from fact-finding to enforcement. It leveraged the contractual and documented evidence to impose real consequences on Linda's exploitative actions, while simultaneously protecting my financial and professional interests from further harm. The process was methodical, legally rigorous, and strategically timed, hallmarks of the approach I had honed over decades managing complex projects and now applied with equal precision to this personal and financial crisis. Linda's legal team received the court orders without delay, the formal injunctions effectively freezing her access to the disputed assets. Given the detailed motions Mark filed, supported by meticulously organized evidence, the court acted swiftly to prevent any further transfers or withdrawals from our joint accounts. From my vantage point in Motel Room 214, I monitored the situation closely, reviewing the notifications as they arrived via email and secure legal portals. Shortly after the court's ruling, attempts by Linda or her representatives to access the joint accounts were consistently met with resistance. Each login was blocked by the multi-factor authentication protocols I had in place, with password changes and security alerts already triggered by Tom's technical oversight. This digital lockdown meant no funds could be moved without my explicit authorization, effectively neutralizing any unilateral financial actions Linda might attempt. The significance of maintaining exclusive administrative control over our financial systems became clear during this critical phase. Tom had installed additional layers of cybersecurity after our initial consultations, ensuring that any unauthorized login attempts generated detailed logs timestamped and archived for forensic purposes. These logs, which Tom began forwarding to me and Mark daily, documented every failed access attempt, data that was immediately added to our growing evidence inventory. Meanwhile, the family court set deadlines for financial disclosure hearings, compelling Linda to submit comprehensive documentation on her debts, assets, and recent financial activities. Given the inconsistencies Mark and I had uncovered, these hearings would be pivotal in exposing Linda's omissions and misrepresentations. I anticipated that this process would increase legal pressure on her, particularly as creditors began to demand repayment on the $45,000 in debts previously concealed from the court. Linda herself reached out, via her attorney, with a proposal for informal settlement discussions. Her approach was cautious but unmistakably aimed at negotiating some form of asset division outside the courtroom. I opted not to engage directly. Instead, I referred all communications to Mark. This decision aligned with my strategic discipline, allowing legal counsel to manage negotiation parameters, preserved professional boundaries, and avoided any risk of misstatements or emotional responses. Throughout this period, my consulting clients remained informed and supportive. I provided updates to my employer and key clients, ensuring transparency about the situation and underscoring my commitment to maintaining uninterrupted professional performance. Their confidence was vital, serving as a stabilizing factor amid personal upheaval. I even secured an additional consulting contract that increased my income by 15%, a strategic move to reinforce financial independence and demonstrate professional resilience. At the same time, the mounting financial strain on Linda became increasingly evident. Creditors, previously unaware of the divorce proceedings or her financial misrepresentations, began issuing collection notices and filing judgments for repayment. These external pressures compounded the legal constraints she faced, creating a multifaceted challenge that extended beyond court orders to affect her personal creditworthiness and financial reputation. I maintained a disciplined routine, reviewing court filings, coordinating with Mark on legal strategy adjustments, and working closely with Tom to monitor account security. Every communication from Linda's side was logged and analyzed for legal relevance. The digital evidence, transaction logs, access attempts, and authentication records continued to reinforce our position, strengthening the case against any claims of improper account control. Throughout these developments, I remained composed and professional. answering inquiries with measured clarity and avoiding any direct confrontation. My focus was on preserving the integrity of the legal process and ensuring our documented evidence was unassailable. This calm, systematic approach contrasted sharply with the emotional volatility such a betrayal might provoke, but I recognized that professionalism was my greatest asset. Linda's unawareness of the comprehensive legal and technical measures constraining her actions played out in real time. She proceeded with plans to relocate and liquidate other assets, unaware that many transactions would fall under scrutiny or be invalidated as the court enforced asset freezes and investigative motions. Her legal team's failure to anticipate the extent of our documentation and the rigor of our defense left her vulnerable to increasing setbacks. Back in room 214, I methodically updated our legal evidence inventory, cataloging every court order, communication, and technical report as new information arrived. This meticulous oversight ensured no detail was overlooked and that we were always prepared for upcoming hearings or motions. The synergy between legal filings and forensic backups was a powerful deterrent against any attempts at financial maneuvering by Linda. In sum, this phase marked a critical inflection point. The court's enforcement of asset freezes and the failure of Linda's attempts to access funds underscored the effectiveness of our professional and technical safeguards. At the same time, mounting external pressures and impending hearings set the stage for a rigorous examination of financial disclosures. Maintaining professional composure and strategic clarity, I was poised to navigate the complex legal terrain ahead, confident that our evidence and legal positioning would continue to build momentum. The family court hearing represented a pivotal moment in this drawn-out battle. Sitting in the sterile courtroom, I maintained the same professional composure I applied to managing high-stakes construction projects. There was no room for emotional displays, only measured presentation of facts and well-organized documentation. Mark Jensen led the proceedings, systematically laying out the evidence of Linda's financial misrepresentations and breaches of our prenuptial agreement. I watched as each piece of our meticulously assembled case was introduced, confident in the strength of our position. Mark began by presenting the detailed inventory of asset liquidation receipts and notarized bills of sale, all confirming the $118,000 in assets I'd sold or pawned to cover Linda's surgery and related expenses. He highlighted how none of these liquidations had been properly disclosed in her financial filings. Then he pivoted to the $45,000 in hidden debts Linda had omitted, including several credit card balances and personal loans. This was a significant breach of the prenuptial agreement's explicit disclosure requirements. The judge examined the spreadsheet Mark submitted, which itemized each debt and asset discrepancy with cross-references to bank statements, property titles, and transaction timestamps. The clarity and precision of the documentation left little room for doubt. I noted that the judge appeared particularly attentive to the clauses in the prenuptial agreement that mandated full financial disclosure and imposed penalties for non-disclosure. Mark emphasized these points, reinforcing that Linda's failure to reveal debts was not just an oversight, but a contractual violation subject to legal consequences. Next, we introduced the technical evidence compiled by Tom Richards. Mark called Tom to testify, explaining the digital architecture of our joint financial accounts. Tom detailed the security protocols, my exclusive administrative access protected by complex passwords, two-factor authentication, and encrypted transaction logs. He presented system diagrams illustrating access rights, which clearly showed that Linda had no independent control or authority to initiate transfers. This testimony nullified any claim she might raise about unauthorized asset management on her part. Tom then submitted forensic backups of all account activity, time-stamped logs that captured every login attempt, transaction, and failed access. These digital records were crucial as they demonstrated a consistent pattern. All legitimate transactions were either performed or authorized by me, while unauthorized attempts, some made by Linda or her agents, were systematically blocked and logged. The court accepted these technical exhibits as conclusive proof of my sole control over the disputed accounts. Mark then moved the discussion toward the legal implications of these findings. He alleged that Linda's concealment of debts and misrepresentation of asset values constituted breaches of fiduciary duty and amounted to fraud under family law statutes. He proposed motions to seek punitive damages, initially estimated at $60,000, reflecting the severity of the misconduct and the financial harm caused. The motions also requested forensic audits of all asset transfers to uncover any other potential irregularities. This comprehensive approach aimed at both restitution and deterrence. Throughout the hearing, I remained attentive yet detached, knowing that the professional rigor of our case and the clarity of evidence were my most effective tools. Mark skillfully presented arguments rooted in contractual obligations and statutory law, avoiding personal attacks and focusing on the objective facts. This legal framing reinforced the credibility of our position and made a compelling case for the court to act decisively. As the hearing progressed, Linda's legal counsel made a strategic pivot, proposing settlement talks that included partial asset returns and financial penalties. However, Mark indicated that any negotiation would require substantial concessions and adherence to strict conditions protecting my interests. I deferred all communications to Mark, maintaining a consistent stance. No informal agreements without full legal oversight. The mounting evidence and legal pressure visibly eroded Linda's negotiating position. The court's willingness to freeze disputed assets and order forensic audits sent a clear signal that misrepresentation and breach of contract would not be tolerated. The combination of documented facts, technical proof, and legal expertise created a formidable barrier against any attempts to circumvent justice. As the hearing concluded, I reflected on the strategic milestones we had achieved. The case had transitioned from a personal dispute to a rigorously documented legal challenge with multiple avenues for enforcement and recovery. Our methodical accumulation of evidence and legal motions had forced Linda and her counsel onto the defensive, shifting the balance of power. Yet the process was far from over. The court's decisions and subsequent proceedings would demand ongoing vigilance and professional discipline. Returning to room 214 after the hearing, I updated our case files with transcripts, judicial orders, and the latest technical reports. Mark and I began preparing additional filings to reinforce motions for punitive damages and to request expanded audits. Tom continued monitoring account activity, readying expert affidavits explaining the digital forensics. Each step was deliberate, designed to sustain momentum and tighten legal constraints around the disputed assets. This hearing marked a critical inflection point. The legal system had recognized the depth of Linda's financial misrepresentations and contractual violations. With overwhelming documentation and expert testimony on our side, the foundation was laid for a comprehensive legal response. The next phase would test our ability to maintain strategic pressure and translate evidence into tangible recovery. But I felt prepared, calm, professional, and resolute as the battle advanced. Linda's professional and personal standing began to unravel rapidly as the legal measures we had initiated took effect. The court's injunctions freezing access to disputed assets were enforced without hesitation, immediately curtailing her financial maneuverability. Creditors, previously kept at bay or unaware of the divorce proceedings and her concealed debts, caught wind of the developing situation and moved swiftly. They filed formal judgments to recover the $45,000 in liabilities Linda had failed to disclose, including credit card balances, medical bills, and personal loans. These judgments escalated her financial distress, compounding the legal consequences she faced. I monitored these developments carefully, reviewing incoming court documents and creditor notices with the same methodical scrutiny I applied to project budgets. Each filing was catalogued and cross-referenced with our existing evidence inventory, maintaining an up-to-date, comprehensive overview of the situation. The weight of these external pressures was significant. Judgments against her credit profile meant her personal credit score plummeted, a critical setback that would affect her ability to secure housing, financing, or new employment. This deterioration was a direct result of the concealed debts and misrepresentations uncovered by our investigation. At the same time, Linda's legal representation began to fracture. Her attorney, who had initially pursued the divorce with aggressive posturing, withdrew midway through the proceedings, citing emerging ethical concerns. The revelation of undisclosed debts and the mounting evidence of fraudulent financial declarations created a conflict for her counsel. Continuing to advocate under these circumstances risked professional sanctions. This unexpected withdrawal left Linda scrambling for replacement legal advice and further weakened her negotiating position. It also underscored the severity of the situation from a professional ethics standpoint. The family court moved decisively in response to these revelations. Besides maintaining the asset freeze, the judge ordered repayment of the $45,000 in concealed debts as part of the divorce proceedings. This directive imposed a legal obligation on Linda that she had previously attempted to evade. Moreover, the court sanctioned forensic audits of all recent financial transactions, authorizing detailed examinations by independent auditors to verify the legitimacy and transparency of asset transfers. These audits threatened to uncover any additional irregularities, increasing the pressure on Linda to comply or face further penalties. Media outlets specializing in legal and financial reporting soon picked up on the case, highlighting its complexity and the severity of the allegations. Local newsletters circulated stories emphasizing the importance of prenuptial agreements and thorough financial disclosure in divorce proceedings. While I neither sought nor encouraged publicity, the coverage served as a cautionary tale within professional circles about the risks of financial mismanagement and the power of detailed documentation. I maintained professional discretion, focusing on the legal process rather than public perception, but the ripple effects reinforced the seriousness of the matter. The divorce proceedings extended beyond routine dissolution into contested litigation. With fraud and non-disclosure allegations on the table, the potential for criminal referrals loomed. My legal team prepared to cooperate fully with any investigations, confident that our documentation and digital forensic evidence would withstand scrutiny. I was determined to ensure that the legal process upheld both contractual integrity and statutory compliance, reflecting the professional standards I had always championed. Throughout this turbulent period, I retained control of critical assets essential to my livelihood and professional standing. The court's injunction successfully prevented further depletion of the estate, safeguarding my severance package, stock options, and liquidated funds. Avoiding bankruptcy and maintaining these resources were paramount, as they provided the foundation for my continued career and financial recovery. Equally important was preserving my professional licenses and reputation. I proactively communicated with my employer and consulting clients to affirm my ongoing commitment and capability. I provided assurances that the legal dispute was a personal matter, being managed through appropriate channels without impact on my professional responsibilities. This transparency helped mitigate any risk of reputational damage or loss of business opportunities. In sum, this phase marked a significant shift in the balance of power. The mounting legal and financial consequences eroded Linda's position while fortifying mine. Creditors' actions, court orders, and attorney withdrawal collectively signaled the gravity of her financial mismanagement and the efficacy of our strategic response. I remained vigilant and professionally composed, continuing to leverage detailed documentation, legal rigor, and trusted allies to navigate the complex path ahead. The culmination of this arduous process came with the final court judgment, delivered after intense hearings and meticulous review of every piece of evidence we had painstakingly assembled. The court awarded me full recovery of the $118,000 in assets I had liquidated to save Linda's life, assets that had been wrongfully omitted from the divorce disclosures, as well as an additional $60,000 in damages for financial fraud stemming from her deliberate concealment of debts and misrepresentation of asset values. This ruling was a direct validation of the strategic documentation and legal groundwork that Mark and I had developed over several months. The judgment meticulously referenced the prenuptial agreement clauses protecting my vested employment benefits, including the $75,000 severance package and stock options, which the court explicitly excluded from the marital estate. This was a critical victory as Linda's earlier attempts to claim these assets were decisively rebuffed. The court ordered Linda to satisfy all indebtedness she had concealed, totaling over $45,000, effectively holding her accountable for the financial obligations she had attempted to hide. The ruling further imposed regulatory fines amounting to $10,000 for her misrepresentations, underscoring the seriousness with which such breaches of legal and fiduciary duty are treated. The judge's written opinion highlighted the comprehensive nature of the evidence presented. The notarized receipts and bank statements confirming asset liquidation, the chronological spreadsheet detailing undisclosed debts, and the technical forensic reports verifying my exclusive control over joint accounts. These elements formed an irrefutable chain of custody that dismantled Linda's claims and demonstrated a clear pattern of financial exploitation. The judgment's language reflected the court's recognition of the methodical professionalism that underpinned the case, explicitly commending the thoroughness of the documentation and the integrity of the legal process. In practical terms, the judgment mandated the immediate restitution of the $118,000 into accounts under my control, along with the $60,000 damages awarded for punitive purposes. Enforcement orders were issued to prevent Linda from liquidating or transferring any remaining assets, pending full compliance. The ruling also required periodic financial disclosures from Linda to ensure ongoing transparency, monitored under court supervision. These measures collectively restored my financial footing and secured protections against further exploitation during the remaining divorce proceedings. Beyond the courtroom, the effects were tangible and far-reaching. My employer publicly reaffirmed their support, issuing a statement recognizing my professionalism and stability throughout the ordeal. Consulting clients also expressed renewed confidence, highlighting the importance of reputation in sustaining business relationships. Industry peers reached out with words of respect for the resilience and methodical approach demonstrated, often referencing the case as a benchmark for handling complex personal financial disputes through professional channels. Linda's position, conversely, deteriorated sharply in the aftermath. The court order to satisfy concealed debts intensified creditor actions, resulting in formal judgments that further compromised her creditworthiness. These financial repercussions hindered her ability to secure housing or new employment, compounding the legal and personal challenges she faced. Her withdrawal of legal counsel amid ethical concerns left her without effective representation during critical stages, amplifying her vulnerability. Regulatory authorities also took note, imposing additional fines and monitoring compliance with disclosure requirements. The potential for criminal referrals loomed, as the findings of fraud and breach of fiduciary duty transcended civil litigation into possible criminal investigation. My legal team remained prepared to cooperate fully with any such inquiries, confident that the rigor and transparency of our documentation would stand up to scrutiny. Throughout this period, I continued to maintain a disciplined, professional demeanor. I updated my case files rigorously, coordinated with Mark and Tom to ensure ongoing legal and technical defenses, and communicated transparently with my professional network. This posture reinforced my reputation as a reliable and principled project manager and consultant, ensuring that the personal nature of the dispute did not jeopardize my career trajectory. The judgment's impact extended beyond immediate financial recovery. It set important precedents within my professional circles regarding the critical importance of prenuptial agreements, comprehensive financial documentation, and strategic legal planning. The case became a reference point, illustrating how methodical preparation and adherence to contractual rights can effectively counteract opportunistic exploitation, even under emotionally charged circumstances. While the trial phase concluded with this judgment, the proceedings remained active to enforce compliance and finalize asset divisions. The court's orders established a clear framework for monitoring and accountability, ensuring ongoing protection of my interests. I remained vigilant, aware that legal battles of this complexity require sustained attention and strategic responsiveness. In essence, the final judgment represented a turning point where professional discipline, legal expertise, and detailed evidence converged to restore equity and justice. The repercussions for Linda were profound, both legally and financially, while my restored assets and reaffirmed professional standing provided a solid foundation for rebuilding. As the case continued toward resolution, I remained committed to navigating the remaining challenges with the same rigor and composure that had guided me from the beginning. Today, I lead a successful consulting firm specializing in construction management, an evolution of my 2 decades of experience and hard-earned lessons. Over the past year, the firm has seen a 20% increase in annual revenue, driven by a strategic focus on efficiency improvements and client relationship management, areas I've always prioritized. Equally important, I now hold equity ownership in the company, a development that reflects my expanded role and investment in the firm's long-term growth. This ownership stake not only aligns my professional interest with the company's success, but also provides a financial foundation more resilient to personal upheavals. The journey to this point has been anything but straightforward. After the tumultuous period following Linda's divorce filing, I committed myself to rebuilding both my professional and financial stability with the same discipline and strategic rigor I applied to managing complex construction projects. The settlements and asset recoveries awarded by the court enabled me to re-establish liquidity and safeguard critical employment benefits, providing essential capital to invest in my consulting operations. These resources allowed me to modernize our project management systems, enhance digital security measures, and expand the team with skilled professionals who share my commitment to excellence. Beyond the financial implications, this experience reinforced the value of detailed documentation and contractual awareness. I now ensure that every consulting engagement is governed by meticulously drafted contracts that specify deliverables, payment schedules, and clear dispute resolution mechanisms. Drawing from my personal ordeal, I've incorporated clauses protecting against potential financial misrepresentations and have implemented robust documentation protocols to preserve accountability. These measures serve not only to protect the firm, but also to build client trust through transparency and professionalism. Reflecting on the legal battles, I recognize that my calm professionalism and strategic patience were critical assets. Instead of reacting with emotion to Linda's unexpected divorce filing and asset claims, I leveraged my expertise in financial record-keeping, contract interpretation, and legal collaboration to methodically dismantle her exploitative claims. Working closely with Mark Jensen, my employment lawyer, and Tom Richards, my trusted IT consultant, we created a multi-layered defense integrating legal precision with technical evidence. This alliance was instrumental in exposing the breaches of fiduciary duty and contractual violations underlying the dispute. The motel room where I initially regrouped, room 214, became a symbol of that transition from personal crisis to professional resurgence. It was there I organized the folders, updated spreadsheets, and coordinated calls that formed the blueprint for reclaiming my assets and reputation. That environment of focused, disciplined strategy starkly contrasted with the chaos of the situation unfolding around me. It underscored a lesson I now share with colleagues and clients alike. Maintaining composure and methodical control amid adversity is essential for effective problem-solving. Looking forward, I am more vigilant than ever about protecting my financial and professional interests. I conduct regular audits of my personal and business accounts, maintain encrypted backups of all contracts and correspondence, and engage legal counsel proactively when complex agreements are negotiated. These practices are not merely precautionary, they are fundamental components of responsible management in today's interconnected business landscape. The case with Linda demonstrated how quickly trust can be exploited without such safeguards, and how critical a comprehensive strategic response is to defending one's position. My network of professional allies has also grown stronger through this process. Many industry peers have reached out to commend the approach I took, an approach grounded in professionalism rather than confrontation. These connections have translated into new consulting opportunities and speaking engagements, where I share insights on risk management, contractual diligence, and the intersection of personal and professional financial planning. The story has become a reference point, illustrating how methodical documentation and legal awareness are indispensable tools for career resilience. In the broader scope of my career, this chapter serves as a powerful reminder that setbacks, no matter how personal or severe, can be transformed into leverage points for growth when approached with discipline and expertise. I remain committed to upholding the highest standards of integrity and professionalism, using every lesson to fortify not only my business, but also my personal resolve. The challenges I faced reaffirmed that success is not just about technical skill, but about strategic patience, clear communication, and trusted partnerships. Though fate did knock on the door of that motel room one evening, it was not luck alone that shaped the outcome. It was the culmination of years of careful preparation, thorough documentation, and unwavering professionalism. This foundation ensured that justice was not only served, but that a superior new beginning was established, one built on resilience, strategic insight, and a renewed commitment to excellence in every facet of my professional life.